Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So my name's Katie and today we're going to be talking about some of the best adult fantasy books for beginners. So if you are new to fantasy, welcome. I feel like fantasy can be a very intimidating genre, just because some of the books sometimes are huge and just these like 10 book series and it's so scary, but yeah, it's a really great genre and I feel like there's such a range. Like you can have kind of just a little dabble in fantasy, or you can have these kind of expansive, like massive sprawling worlds and series. But I wanted to do a list of just some kind of beginner books, and maybe if you haven't read much fantasy before but you kind of wanted to get more into it, and just kind of ones that will kind of almost teach you some like fundamentals of the genre, and they're really easy to kind of follow. They're great fantasy books. Even if you're not a beginner to fantasy, these are all great books, so I'd recommend them. And maybe we'll do like an intermediate fantasy and an advanced fantasy recommendations as well. I feel like that would be fun. But for now we're just doing beginner. So yes. Okay, so the first one I feel like we have to start with because I love Sanderson, obviously, and that is The Final Empire, which is the first book in the Mistborn trilogy. So the whole Mistborn trilogy is a great place to start, because I feel like the magic system is really well explained, and that is a really good like bonus, especially if you're just starting out with fantasy. And it's quite like sciencey almost, which my brain likes. So basically we're following Vin, who is this kind of street orphan, and at the start of the book she discovers she's a Mistborn, and a Mistborn is this person who can ingest metals and get powers from them, and Mistborns can basically ingest the full range of metals and get the full range of powers, whereas you also have these things called mistings who can ingest one metal and get one power, and then you have just normal people, the peasants. So Vin discovers she's a Mistborn and she gets recruited by this guy called Kelsier to his kind of band of like criminals or misfits, and they are basically trying to take down the Lord Ruler, who is this kind of powerful emperor of the world, like the kind of Dark Lord type thing. So they're trying to take him down, and it's in this world where it's Scandriel and there's like ash falling from the sky all the time, and it's very like misty and like atmospheric. But yeah, Vin's a great character. She's really easy to root for. She's kind of very like, I would say, classic fantasy heroine type character. She's like small and stabby. Just watching her like journey throughout the 3 books and like growing into her powers. And Kelsey is a great kind of mentor type figure. And well, yeah, I don't know how I feel about Kelsier now, but Kelsier in Mistborn, I really loved him the first time I read it. He's this kind of like, yeah, charming like type. He's really funny as well, and he's just out for mayhem and to kind of avenge his like dead wife and take down the Lord Ruler. And he's also a Mistborn, and the kind of plot kind of builds up, and it at the end of the book it's like this kind of explosive like finale, but I feel like it's reasonably fast paced throughout. So a lot of fantasy books will tend to have kind of a slow build up and then a really explosive ending, and it kind of gives time to like get the political like machinations in place, and then it has a more impactful ending that way. And I feel like this book really nicely introduces you to that, especially Sanderson's style, because he has like the Sander launch at the end where it's like bam bam bam. And I think, yeah, like if you're interested in the Stormlight Archive, I feel like especially The Way of Kings, you have to kind of know Sanderson's style, because like the first half is very kind of exposition heavy. So I feel like having read this, you sort of know and like trust him as an author, so then you can read more bigger books. And yeah, so this is a great place to start, and this was kind of one of the first major adult fantasies I read as well. So yeah, if you want to be like me, which I don't know why you would, but yeah, this is a good place to start. And then before you know it, you'll have 10 shelves of all adult fantasy. Okay, then we also have City Brass by S.A. Chakraborty, and this is the Daevabad series, so City Brass, Kingdom of Copper and Empire of Gold. This one I feel like has a lot of crossover appeal between YA and adult. So like if you like YA fantasy but you're looking to get more into adult fantasy, I feel like this is also a really good series. Not just with age of the characters, because the characters aren't too old, they're like 20 or something. Well, other than Dara, who's like immortal. But yeah, but I feel like it just builds really nicely on itself, and like you slowly uncover more about the politics in the world, and I feel like it's a really good introduction to the kind of like political drama of some adult fantasies. Like there's a really kind of complex political situation in Daevabad, which is the city. So basically we're following Nari, who is this con artist living in Cairo, and at the start of the book she accidentally summons this jinn called Dara, who sort of takes her away to this like magical city called Daevabad. And in Daevabad there is a lot of political strife going on, and Nari also discovers she's kind of has these hidden ties to the Deva and those kind of magical like jinn, and she's quite an important like legacy. And we're also following the Prince Alizade, who is, I don't know what he's doing, he's a mess. No, he is trying to fight for the rights of these Shafi, who are like half human, half jinn, and they're quite oppressed in the world, and he's slightly misguided in how he's going about it, so he's kind of learning. And Ali's very like scholarly, and yeah, he's quite awkward, I would say. But yeah, so we're kind of, it's a good way, and like there's only 2 POVs, so we're only following Nari and Ali and their POVs, so it's not like overwhelming with like 10 different POVs, so that's quite good. It's third person, which I tend to prefer third person, especially for fantasy. We just kind of, and because Nari is kind of coming into this world from the like human world, we're kind of learning about it through her eyes, so it's not too overwhelming all at once. We're just kind of learning the information with Nari, and just the whole magic and like the mythology is also good. And we're slowly introduced some more kind of characters and more like nuanced villains. Well, okay, I just love Meniza, who is the main villain, I would say villainess of the series, but I love her. Powerful, tragic villains are like my kryptonite. And then we also have Michael J. Sullivan's books, so mainly Theft of Swords is like the starting point, I would say. And then this one, we're following this like duo called Royce and Hadrian, and they like are like thieves for hire essentially. And in the first book, Theft of Swords, they basically get framed for like the murder of the king, because they get told to steal the sword, but like when they're doing it, they essentially get framed. So then they end up like in prison, and then they have to escape, and it just all goes a bit wrong. And this is such a good series. Like, it's so, the kind of, as the books go on, the kind of fantasy elements build, but the first book especially is kind of, it's set in a fantasy world, but we're very much focused on like Royce and Hadrian and their kind of drama of what's happening to them, and like the kind of thieving aspects, and like the kind of, there's a bit of politics as well, like sprinkled in, but I feel like it's a really easy book for beginners, and it's very easy to read. Like, it's not flowery writing or anything. It's very good, like easy writing, which I like. Same with Sanderson actually. Audiobooks are also really good if you're looking to get into fantasy audiobooks. And his other series, yeah, I would say the Age of like Legend or Age of War or whatever it's called, Age of something, Age of Myth. What's it? Oh, Legends of the First Empire. That's the series name. That's also a really good series. I'd say that's slightly more like, not as beginner friendly for fantasy, but it's also really good. And you could read it. I feel like, I don't know what I'm talking about with the beginner stuff. Like, I feel like some people could just read Stormlight and like be fine. It was their first fantasy book ever. But yeah, Theft of Swords is really good. And like the whole, like, I feel like it plays into a lot of kind of classic fantasy tropes, like the kind of lost heir and this sort of it's like, yeah, duo, like Grumpy Sunshine duo, various other things. There's like magical like dragon type creatures. They're not quite dragons, but that kind of thing, and there's just a lot of, and there's like a princess, and yeah, there's just all sorts. So it's a good series. I filmed like 4 videos already, so I'm slowly losing the will to live. So then next we have Foundryside by Robert Jackson Bennett. I feel like this is another one that's really kind of, the magic system is really well explained, and it's really interesting, and you're just kind of learning more about the magic, and you're sort of learning about it through the main character's eyes, so it's not too overwhelming all at once. And you're following Sanchi, who's like this thief, and she discovers this like key, and the key starts talking to her, so the key is called Clef, and Clef is an iconic character. I love him. Any sort of like animal, not animal, or like thing that's like talks, I just always love that trope. I guess it's a trope. Yeah, I love that. I might do a video of like my favourite talking companions. I don't know. But yeah, I think I read Foundryside at a really similar time to when I read Warbreaker, and they're kind of similar to like Night and Blood. Yes, and we're kind of discovering about this world and its mythologies, and Sancho also ends up somehow, I think they're trying to pull off this heist actually into this like mountain, and so Sancho teams up with this like old grumpy inventor type character called Orso, and his kind of young apprentice called Berenice, and Sancho and Berenice have this like relationship, and I love their relationship, it's so cute. And then also this like soldier guy called Gregor, he gets involved somehow, and so they all have to team up and try and get this thing from the mountain. And so yeah, so it's a good like easy storyline to follow, but there's also a lot of kind of elements that are brought in, that like extra plot points that all kind of tie in together and come to the end. Actually, that's another thing about Theft of Swords. You get these like seemingly random scenes, but the way they all kind of tie together at the end is really good. And I feel like that struck me the first time I read Bountryside, how nicely everything kind of tied together at the end. It just all kind of comes together perfectly. And I feel like it's another one with pretty like easy prose to read, but it's also really like nice, and it's just slightly cheesy. I feel like, and I always love like just a little bit of cheese, so yeah, sometimes it doesn't take itself too seriously, and so yeah, that's really good. And I feel like it's a good introductory to kind of like the like not hidden magic, but like this hidden history, and they have to learn more about the history in order to learn more about magic, which I feel like is quite common in a lot of fantasy books, and I feel like this one is sort of a little bit of that like introduction almost to that. So yeah, that's really good. The next we have a novella. So I feel like novellas are good because they're not intimidating, so it's like a little bit fantasy but not too much, and that is The Empress of Sultan Fortune and When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain by Gideon. And these are such great novellas. They're like a warm hug basically, if you just need like a really short but comforting read, and they'll just make you feel like you're kind of being told a bedtime story. They're really great. So we're following, in both of them we're following this monk called Chi, and she's basically, they are going around like collecting stories from people. So in the first one we're having the story told of the like Empress of the kind of past, and by one of her handmaidens, and so the Empress kind of sent away, and she's kind of in this like thing, and it's quite like feminist and empowering, and then in the second one Chi is with this other character whose name I can't remember, but they're like travelling over the mountains, and there they get waylaid by these like tiger spirits, and basically in order to convince the tigers not to eat them they get the tigers to tell them this story of this other tiger who kind of fell in love with this scholar. And both of them are sapphic, which is really good, and both Empress of Sultan Fortune and When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain. And I love the whole kind of, I love Chi, they're such a cute character, but also the like past storylines that are kind of being told to you. I love the kind of being told a tale type thing. So yeah, so there's not a lot of like heavy magic or anything like in a lot of fantasy, it's just kind of this fantasy world, and there's quite like mythology, kind of spirits and stuff. So that's a really nice kind of introduction to that. And then we also have The 100,000 Kingdoms by N.K. Jemisin. So I have a guide video to N.K. Jemisin, which is kind of a bit old, so maybe I'll do an updated version. Well, I mean, the books are all the same. I just don't know how good quality I am. But yeah, N.K. Jemisin's books are amazing, but I feel like some of them, like especially the 5th season thing, I wouldn't say that was like a good place to start with fantasy. But The 100,000 Kingdoms is really good, and I feel like it's a good introduction to the kind of whole like, yeah, again, the like political drama that you get, and the kind of gods trope, like where the gods come down and start interfering with humans, and that whole thing. And yes, yeah, so following Yen, who's kind of traveling to this like palace where the kind of gods, these like children of the gods are, and her mother has, I think her mother's just died, but her mother grew up there, so she's kind of going back to try and find out what's going on to like her grandfather who like runs the place. And you have these like gods and demigods who are like running amok among this palace, and yeah, so it's really good. And the kind of there's these two main gods who are sort of at war with each other. Well, there's like, I can't remember I know he's called Sunny in the Broken Kingdoms because that's his like nickname, but I can't remember his actual name. And then Nohadon, and he's like the god of light and day, and then you have Nohadon, who's like the god of night, who's like this broody type evil, I don't know. It's kind of following Yen and her kind of navigating what's going on in the court and trying to solve these mysteries. And yeah, and I feel like it also, N.K. Jemisin is really good at narrative twists. This one has really kind of good narrative twist, as well as Broken Kingdoms, which is the second book in the series, and I feel like that kind of prepares you for the like narrative twist of the 5th season. So yeah, that's really good as well, and N.K. Jemisin's writing is so good. So yeah, I would really, and the themes she touches on are also good, so I'd highly recommend that one. And then finally the last one is sci-fi, but who cares? It's sort of a little bit, well, okay, it's mainly sci-fi, but I wanted to include it because it's a good series, because it kind of, each book sort of steps up a level, and that is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. So in the first one, it's very, I feel like the first one when it first came out was kind of advertised like YA, and it's quite like dystopian, because we're following Darrow, who is a red, and the red's kind of the like bottom tier of society, and basically he goes to infiltrate the gold for like these top powerful rulers of the society, and because it's like segregated by colour. So yeah, Darrow becomes this gold, and then he ends up in these like, there's almost like Hunger Games type scenario where they like are in these groups of like the teenagers in order to try and become, I think, in the gold military maybe. So they have to like fight, and I'm not entirely sure what the end goal is of this tournament thing, because they're not trying to kill each other. They're like trying to, I don't know if they're just trying to survive basically. But yeah, so they're trying to like fight, and then, and I think the people, the other golds can like watch them and then decide who they want to recruit from this, like, so they're trying to prove themselves. But then the later books, it becomes much more like political and much more kind of a whole world, like whole solar system scope, and you're finding a lot more out about the different like cultures and different peoples. Like there's these, the obsidians, that's it, the obsidians, and they're quite different from like the other characters, the other like colours, and yeah, and just the whole, the like science, it becomes much more space focused. And then by Dark Age you have this massive world, well, multiple worlds, and lots of kind of political drama, and the way it all like interacts with each other, and the whole like lots. So the first three you just get Darrow's POV, but then the second trilogy you get about 4 or 5 different POVs. It's all kind of intricately connected, and you kind of following different elements, but they all kind of play into each other. And yeah, it's just such a good series, so I'd highly recommend that. And then yeah, so you get invested in like Red Rising, and then as the series progresses you realise you're getting more and more complex, so it's good. Yeah, so if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and consider subscribing if you haven't already. And I hope you're all having a great day, and I will see you next time.